Hello and welcome to the Eye of the Serpent channel. My name is Edgar Martin Del Campo, and the Eye of the Serpent channel talks about native culture, religion, spirituality, and language from North to South America. And this is my first Q&A session. I offered this in August 2024, and I wanted to first thank everybody for contributing your thoughtful questions that I'm going to try to answer according to three principal themes. The first is about how I have come to this knowledge, what made me decide to learn about the languages and cultures of the Native American areas, especially the Mesoamerican region, because I was born in Mexico, and this is a part that I identify the most with. The second major theme is primary sources. What kinds of materials do I use, and what contents can I apply from these primary sources, such as the codices? And the third theme that I got through your questions was, how could this be applied to personal practice, experience, and growth? So what I'd like to do is try to take these on in each at a time. So I'd like to first start with some questions about how I have come to this channel, how the background that I bring, and what decisions I make to come to understanding and learning about Mesoamerican religion, language, and other aspects of the culture. So speaking from my own perspective, one of the first questions that I got was, how did I come to learn Nahuatl, and what made me decide to pursue this? And I would say that there were three major phases for my acquisition of the language. The first was when I was a teenager. I was about 16 years old, and I wanted to write a science fiction novel when I was living in a part of the Bible Belt, Missouri, where there was very little awareness of other creation stories aside from the book of Genesis. And I wanted to show that there was something else. And so I figured that I could learn about specifically the Mexica mythology and turn this into a science fiction story. And I kind of look back on it, it would have looked something like Guardians of the Galaxy with Aztecs. And it taught me to learn Nahuatl at a very preliminary level. I was learning a lot of the vocabulary. I was learning much of the lexicon so that I could start to see the patterns in how these nouns and verbs were being constructed. So that was my first phase, was back when I was 16, and all the way up through college. I kept trying to learn kind of the building blocks of the grammar so that I could make a believable language for my writing. Then the second phase was when I started graduate studies toward a PhD in anthropology, and I started taking formal coursework with a regimented curriculum that would comprehensively look at aspects of Nahuatl grammar through both contemporary spoken dialects, such as those in Guerrero and in Veracruz, as well as some important training in the classical dialect that was spoken by the Mexica and some of the other literary sources from the early colonial period. So that was my second phase, was when I was learning it from an academic perspective, and this was toward an academic career. So I was looking to become a professor, and for a few years I was. I taught professionally for 7 years in college, and I used the Nahuatl lessons as a recurrent part of my curriculum, teaching students about grammar, language, religion, and so on by using colonial Nahuatl materials. And the third phase was for this channel, where I actually started to look with very important discipline and dedication to specifically the classical dialect that was spoken by the Mexica and other early colonial literary resources. So this one is about specifically the classical dialect, because there is a tremendous amount of interest in the Mexica and the language and how they express their beliefs and their practices through the language. So now I'm in phase 3 of my acquisition of the Nahuatl, specifically with the classical dialect. So that is a very large part of what I am researching, specifically toward creating a new YouTube channel, or a new a video channel for YouTube, TikTok, and any other related media outlets. There are about 1.5 million speakers of Nahuatl dialects today, and they are from the West End in Nayarit and Jalisco, as well as the East End, that is like say in the coast of Veracruz, all the way down into parts of Tabasco. And so there are about 1.5 million speakers who are using a variant of, or a dialect of, Nahuatl in various parts of central Mexico. If we include Pipil, which is an offshoot that was spread out in Central America, then we can probably say another 20,000 speakers in El Salvador, Honduras, and possibly even Panama. So between those two communities, we can say there's somewhere around 1.5 million speakers altogether. And that also doesn't include the immigrants in the United States and Canada and elsewhere in the world who are continuing to keep their language, to preserve the language, especially when they identify as part of their own ethnic heritage. So that it is still a very active and thriving language. And I'm glad to see that there is such an interest in the language, because for many decades, there's been a long kind of shame and embarrassment for being indigenous, and that often includes being able to speak the language. So many of the more recent generations have tried to forget those these native languages, but I'm seeing more and more of a revitalization and an interest in reclaiming these languages as part of reclaiming the indigenous aspects of their identity. I myself have never identified as Aztec or Mexico or any sort of Nahua heritage. Since fifth grade, since I was like 10 years old, I was taught very early that my roots were Huichol from West Mexico, especially the area of Nayarit. But more recently, I'd say within the past 10 years or so, it's been more confirmed that we are actually of the Cora descent, or Nayarite, who are genetically and linguistically the closest relatives of Huichol, so I could understand the confusion. But Huichol and Cora are actually two separate languages. And this is another reason why I was so interested in learning about Native American cultures, because I wanted to learn more about the Native part of my own ancestry from my mother's father's background. My grandfather was from the southeast part of Nayarit, which borders the northwest part of Jalisco, and this part of Jalisco and Nayarit that was home to the Huichol and the Cora. And so I actually went to Nayarit to learn a little bit more about this part of my own roots, my own ancestry. And I realized that many of you coming to the channel are interested in learning more about this. So I try to be as diverse as possible. That's why I never really wanted this channel to be about any particular ethnic group or nationality, but really diversifies, because I've always wanted this channel to be inclusive of the larger and looking at the big picture of the Native American peoples and cultures and languages from the north to the south ends of the hemisphere.